In my hands, I am holding what appears to be just a handful of Indiana Jones style bullwhips. But one of these is not like the other. And I want to talk a little bit today about whips, their uses, and what you get for the money. So, I'll bring the camera a little closer and I'll show you what I have here. So on this hand, I have my 8-foot Morgan style by Louie Fox 12 plat kangaroo hide. And then over here I have my 20 plat Indy 4 by 808 Whips. And in the middle I have my newest whip. This is purportedly an 8 plat Cowhide whip that I picked up on Amazon for $37. And the question is, does this in any way belong in this very, very wonderful collection of whips? I think it does. There are a couple of things that I want to discuss when it comes to whips. So, let's take a look at this whip in particular. So, drop these other ones. So I think that as far as looks goes, it's not bad. We do have an attempt here at a proper Turk's head here, and then it is in fact here, and it actually splits different types of plaiting here and here, going all the way down. Being 8 plat, it doesn't go to a very fine point, and from what I can tell, this fall isn't put on here in a traditional manner, and that the fall itself is absurdly short. It's about 1 foot 2 inches maybe, with a cracker on. But as far as initial impressions that I got, it's halfway decent. You know, I'm going to compare it here to a kangaroo hide bullwhip, costing many, many times more. And it's obvious that they tried. What's interesting is, if this is an 8-inch spike, I haven't pulled out rulers or anything yet, but if this is an 8-inch spike, this definitely follows more of a Raiders look. As Morgan moved later through the trilogy, what happened was this knot got moved down further, so it was no longer at the top of the 8-inch spike, which is what I think this is trying to replicate. So what this is basically is attempting to replicate those early 80s whips, which is interesting that they actually tried to do this. Not bad for $37, honestly. And also, if you look at the plaiting here, it is, alright, at first glance, passable. Not great, relatively tight. It's nowhere near as even, and there are strange lumps throughout the whip. But it's doing a passable job of imitating what I would consider to be a member of the real thing. Obviously, where this whip really falls apart is here at the end. You can see that the fall hitch in this whip is much smaller, and I think that they actually split that and attempted to do a proper, this just hasn't been cut back. So I think they're actually attempting a proper fall hitch there. I'd have to take it apart to take a look at it, but obviously here you can really see that the level of plaiting is nowhere near as close as this one is. And then of course you have, what's really interesting is this fall, if it were extended to the proper length, would almost be passable. The fall that I have on this whip now I got from David Morgan. I visited their shop the last time I was out in Washington, and I had them put this on. I also was given a piece of white hide so that I can actually cut my own, and it's possible that my first thing I'm going to do is attempt to cut this one a new fall. But you can see it's much too thick and obviously much too short. But it is a passing attempt. That's the important thing. That's what I get from this whip. They're really attempting to try to do something. Alright, so the other question, of course, is what does it do incredible belly. This really rather actually stiff transition here, and then once that ends about here, then it's just kind of like rope, but it does have these kind of interesting bumps and whatnot. When it came to me, it actually came in a super long package. It was weird, super long package. So here, I'm gonna put you. There you go. I'm gonna put you right there. Excellent, thank you. And I mean, it cracks, and it does whip things. You can do whip things with it. But what I noticed immediately is weight distribution. So bullwhips, of course, work on the, what is it, the conservation of angular momentum, I think? Something like that, where all of the weight and the energy that is put here because of the continuous taper ends up here and accelerates this to beyond the speed of sound, resulting in a whip crack. This, I'm almost certain, is a wooden handle, all right? Traditionally, Indy whips were built on an 8-inch steel spike. Legend has it that it was a large nail that someone had in their shop and they built it off of that. But I'm almost positive that this is a wooden handle. And what that means is this whip ends up carrying more weight here. And because it carries more weight here, you get this kind of weird floppy motion at the tip. So where you'd expect it to just flow beautifully to the tip, I have a weight at the end of this, and I can definitely feel. I mean, it cracks and it's cracking, right? And I'm getting sort of a rolling loop out of it. It's okay, and it's getting better the more that I use it. But it's definitely not like my other whips. So just really quickly, as a comparison, you can see that way. That way. There we go. Because I'm going to crack the camera here. You can see how that rolls out. Hopefully you can see how that rolls out there. And I don't have this weight because I have this lead and then I have the steel spike, and that's the weight that I'm throwing out of this whip. And that just moves beautifully. So, and just because I brought it out, I don't really have anything to say about it. Then of course I also have this. But again, conservation of angular momentum. I can just move that beautifully. And it rolls out beautifully because the weight starts here and it ends out there. Not something that is in this whip here. Also, I have a beautiful knot in my phone. So this whip, what do we do with it? Well, I imagine that if I put a new fall on it and possibly retied the fall hitch so that it looked a little better, and I don't know, like, I think this whip actually occupies a pretty good place, and that's what I want to talk about now. There is a huge amount of information out there about these bullwhips. Places like Indy Gear and the Club Obi-Wan forums and Cracking Worldwide Facebook groups, and just the ability to talk to people. We have a tremendous amount of information about this whip in particular. Mr. Morgan wrote a series of books. His Whips and Whip Making actually covers the construction of this whip. We have high detailed images of these whips. There was, if you go to the Indy Gear forums and look up the Raiders whip, there was an early 80s era whip that Mark Allen of Western Stage Props had, that one of the forum members took out a caliper, measured where these strands were, how many there were, what the taper, like everything you'd want to know about the whip. If you wanted to get a whip in that era, exactly how it was being made by David at the time. So we have that information, and that information is out there for people who are, when they are cosplaying, creating costumes or whatnot, to duplicate that. You can duplicate that to a very precise and specific way. And there are now people who can get you that. I know that Bernardo Del Carpio has is known for creating whips that are the picture-perfect and quintessential versions of these whips between the movies. Raiders Temple of Doom and Last Crusade and all of the little nuances that go into that. I know that Midwest Whips is creating their, I want to say it's like the 1936 Indy, I think they call it, which is, again, going back and getting that very precise look, that very, very precise early 80s Morgan look. And if you want that, you can do that. If you want to spend $550, I think is about going rate, anywhere between, I'd probably say the $475 to about $600 is what you're looking at, depending on which length of whip you want. Then we get into the, well, are you carried or cracking? Most of the cracking scenes in Raiders, it was an 8-foot whip. On the belt was most likely and almost always a 10-foot whip. So, you know, you're looking at a pretty serious investment. What happens if you wanted to do an Indiana Jones cosplay that you were going to wear once, twice, 3 times and call it a day? What would you get? Honestly, if you're not cracking the whip and you want something that at a glance no one is really going to look twice at, this is a decent approximation of what I would imagine you could get. And I'm surprised in saying that, because I was looking at the photos and being like, maybe I'll come to this conclusion, but I doubt it. It's gonna need some work. This is where I am not worried about if you want to use Fuller's Earth or drag it through the dirt to give it a look. This whip has a very well and used in look. When I post it, people wonder how I get all of these different colors. You'll notice how this knot is a little darker. There's a little bit of dirt there. This is a whip that's been, you know, used. How did I get it here? Well, I used it, and I've used it for the last 5 years on and off. Recently, I've really gotten into it because I really enjoyed it. But it has this really well-worn-in look. If you wanted to duplicate that artificially, I know that some people are going to gnash their teeth at my use of that term here, but that's what I'm going to say. It's like putting holes in jeans, okay? They did happen there, but if you were to artificially age this, I think you could get somewhere with it. The beginning, the natural tan is actually really close to the natural tan that you'd have in Kangaroo, even though it's Cowhide. And if you were to rub some Fuller's Earth and drag this through the dirt, you know, add a little bit of wear and tear to it, I think you'd have something that would look really good. Maybe just paint it to get those dark spots, or add a wash to it or something like that. Biggest thing is you're going to have to get it to coil correctly, which, because it's so light, it doesn't want to coil correctly right now. That would take some work. But honestly, if I'm going to use myself as an example, because I do this, I'm one of those guys. If I see you walking around as Indiana Jones at a con, say, and you have this on your belt, you've done some work to it, it's coiled correctly, and it's sitting there, I'm probably going to do a double take, because this is pretty good, actually. And for any Indiana Jones, okay, I'm going to be even more precise. Any Raiders cosplay, because obviously this has the knot at the end of the handle, or at the end of the spike. Any Raiders cosplay, this is great. You're out, $40. It arrives Amazon Prime. You'll have it in 2 days. Put a week's worth of work into it to make it look really good. Make sure you've got the belt right, the boots right, gloves right, jacket right, hat right. And this is gonna serve you really well. As a cracking whip, I don't know. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna throw some leather dressing at it. Not sure if I'm gonna do any work here yet, even if it's even worth it. I don't know. But like I said, it's a $37 whip. It does crack, but it doesn't crack well, and it doesn't crack, you know, you'd be much better saving your money and getting a better whip if that's what you want to do. As far as a costume piece, though, I am, all right, we can do this, right? Obviously, upon closer inspection, it falls apart, but, you know, there's a lot you could do. You could use this as a baseline if you wanted. You could untie this knot here. You could get some leather. You could retie it here and get a much more prototypical knot here. Or, excuse me, not prototypical. That's a model aerodynamic term. Screen accurate. Excuse me. That's the term I'm looking for. A screen accurate knot here. But if you don't want to spend $550, $600 to get an Indiana Jones whip that you want to use for costuming purposes and light cracking if you so desire, I'd look at this. If you're looking to get into whip cracking, I wouldn't look at this. You're much better off spending $150 in nylon and getting a really good nylon whip if cracking is what you're into. But surprisingly enough, that's the conclusion that I've reached with that whip. So those are my initial impressions. There may be a follow-up video, I don't know. But $37, that is the Indiana Jones 7-foot bullwhip from Amazon.com. I'll put a link in the doobly-doo if you're interested. Who knows? Maybe it can help you with an Indiana Jones cosplay. And if it does, then I've done my job here. And if you buy one, crack it and destroy it, but have fun doing it, I've also done my job here. Anyway, I'm James, hopefully making whip content again, as long as the weather holds. And stay safe and practice.